I lived above his little room for 21 years, and only after his funeral did I learn his full name. Not because I was a cruel or indifferent woman, no, I greeted him. Sometimes I nodded to him from the stairs, sometimes I said good morning, sometimes I asked him to open the gate when I came home late from my sister's house. He would answer briefly, "Good morning, mistress," and that was all. That is how people live in a large insula by the harbour. One person opens the gate, another carries a basket of fish, a third repairs a sandal by the stairs, a fourth quarrels with his wife behind the wall. Everyone is close, everyone hears one another, but everyone knows only what lies on the surface. We knew him as Serapion, the gatekeeper, the watchman, the old man by the gate. He came to our building when I was 37. My son had just begun studying with a scribe, my husband was still alive, and a fig tree grew in the courtyard before they cut it down because its roots lifted the paving stones. Serapion was short and thin, with a dark face and shoulders that always looked as though a sack of grain rested on them. In winter, he wrapped himself in an old cloak. In summer, he wore a faded tunic tied with a rope. Every morning I saw him from my window. He swept the courtyard. Every evening, when the harbour shops closed, he lit the lamp by the gate. Between those two tasks, my life passed. And his did too. At the end of winter, he died. I did not learn it at once. First, I noticed the lamp by the entrance was not lit. Then I noticed wet leaves lying near the fountain. Then I realized the gate had been creaking for 3 days and no one had oiled the hinges. On the 4th day, the building manager, Publius Festus, came. "Serapion died in the night," he said. "In his room. They found him this morning. We need to clear the space. The Grain Guild wants to put crates there." Just like that, a man had died, and the first thing needed was space. 7 people came to the burial: the manager, 2 carriers, old Fulvia from the first floor, me, Menecrates the shopkeeper, and the boy from the bakery, who simply stood by the wall and did not know what to do with his hands. The tablet said, "Serapion, watchman." No family name, no age, nothing about where he had come from, as though a man were only his job. 10 days later, Publius Festus knocked at my door. "Tullia Crispa, you are on the tenants' council. Help me clear the room. Old things, rags, rubbish. I will bring sacks." Serapion's room was under the stairs, between the entrance to the cellar and the small storeroom for amphorae. I had passed that door thousands of times. Not once had I thought there might be a life behind it. Publius lifted the latch. The door opened stiffly as though it did not want to. From inside came the smell of wax, dust, dried herbs, and old lamp oil. I stepped in and stopped. Every wall was covered with faces. Not gods, not military trophies, not cheap pictures from the market. People, small wooden boards, wax tablets, thin pieces of clay, on each one a face. Quick, alive, sometimes very simple but recognizable. An old woman with a basket, a woman by the fountain, a man with a bandaged arm, a girl laughing near the stairs, a boy with a loaf of bread, an old man carrying a jug of wine, and beneath every face a name. Tullia Crispa, the day she returned from court, Ides of March. I picked up the board with shaking hands. It was me, many years younger, a loose strand of hair against my cheek, a dark cloak, the face of a woman who had held herself together all day and nearly broke at the gate. I remembered that day, the dispute over my husband's inheritance. 2 hours before the clerks, my husband's brother saying a widow understood nothing about accounts. I left the court building and walked home so quickly I barely saw the road. Serapion had seen me, but he had not approached. On another board was Fulvia from the first floor. Fulvia Larcia, first day after illness, walked by herself. Then Menecrates, baker, dropped the basket and laughed. Lucia Festa, new manager, first day with the keys. Antonia Severa, carrying water at night, no one helped. Publius stood behind me in silence. Then he said, "Did he draw all of us?" In the corner stood a narrow bed, a grey coverlet, a clay cup, a small table. On the table were brushes, a little box of paints, a dulled knife, and rolls of wax. On a shelf lay a casket. I opened it. Inside were dozens, hundreds of tablets, bundles tied with linen thread. On each one a name and a date, not one without a label, not one face without a name. At the very bottom lay a board wrapped in soft cloth, a girl of about 7, dark curls, large eyes. In her hands a small bird. The inscription read, "Nerida, last spring." I knew no Nerida in our building. The next day I returned alone. Under the bed I found a thin notebook made of fastened wax tablets. Serapion had kept records, short ones, dry ones, sometimes only a single line. Came to the house by the harbour. Many people, noisy. That is good. Silence is worse. Tullia Crispa cried at the gate, did not approach. I have no right to enter another person's pain without being called. Fulvia's window did not open for 3 days. Called a physician, said it was from the manager. The baker's boy is without a cloak again, left an old wool one by the oven. Let him think it was his father. I turned the tablets further. I cannot bring back Nerida. I cannot bring back Diona. I can at least remember these people. While I remember them, they are not alone. Diona, his wife perhaps. Between the tablets lay a rolled sheet of thin parchment, old, almost transparent. A certificate from Alexandria. A fire in the quarter near the warehouses. Dead, Diona, wife of the freedman Gaius Julius Serapion, and Nerida, his daughter, 7 years old. Gaius Julius Serapion, that was his name, not simply Serapion, not watchman, not the old man at the gate. Gaius Julius Serapion. I sat on his bed and held that sheet until the light from the small window grew dim. For 21 years he had opened our gate, and no one had asked what gates had closed behind him before that. On the 3rd day I went to Fulvia. She had lived in our building longer than anyone. She was almost 80, but her memory was stronger than that of many young people. "Did you know his name?" I asked. "Serapion's? Of course. Gaius Julius Serapion." Shame struck me so sharply it felt almost physical. "You asked him?" "In the first month. A man should not be called only by a nickname or by his work. I asked, 'What is your name in the records?' He answered. It seems no one else asked." I told her about the boards, the faces, the notes. About Nerida and Diona. Fulvia was silent for a long time. Then she said, So that is why he looked at the courtyard that way. What way? As if he were afraid to blink and lose someone else. I asked Publius not to throw his things away. He waved me off. Tullia, it is touching, but the room is needed. It must be empty before the calends. Give me 7 days. For what? I want to show people what he left. Who needs drawings by an old gatekeeper? I looked at him. We do. He was ready to argue. Then he saw the board with his own face. On it, he was very young, with a thin beard and an important expression. The inscription read, Publius Festus, first day as manager, trying very hard to look older. Publius flushed. 7 days, he said. Then we clear the room. I chose 100 boards. Not the most beautiful ones, the most alive. Fulvia helped me remember names. Menecrates lent tables from the bakery. The priest at the little shrine of Mercury allowed us to use the side portico for one evening. We arranged the boards in rows, year by year. First, the old courtyard with the fig tree, then the new well, then the fire in the oil shop, then weddings, funerals, returns, illnesses, reconciliations by the fountain. Our life, which we ourselves had not remembered. Separately, I placed the notebook. I opened it to the first entry. I cannot bring back my family. I can remember someone else's. Beside it, I set the portrait of Nerida, the girl with the bird, last spring. That evening, I thought perhaps 10 people would come. Almost everyone came. People entered the portico and laughed awkwardly at first, as if it was strange to look at the faces of neighbors. Then they found themselves and fell silent. Menecrates saw his wife, who had died 6 years earlier. On the board, she stood by the oven with flour on her cheek. He ran a finger along the edge of the wood and said, I had forgotten that smile. Fulvia found herself on the day she first came into the courtyard after her illness. I thought no one saw, she whispered. Publius stood before his portrait for a long time. Then he said quietly, The old man had nerve. He was right about trying to look older. And he turned away so no one would see his eyes. Toward evening came Marcia, the young woman from the bakery. She held the hand of her younger brother, who was now tall and almost grown. He saw the board where a little boy stood by the oven in someone else's large cloak. Is that mine? Marcia asked. I nodded. He used to leave a cloak for him in winter, and bread when you had no earnings. She covered her mouth with her hand. We thought Father was buying it secretly, and Father thought I was. We argued about it so many times. Her brother was silent. Then he took his new cloak from his shoulders and laid it beside the board. Let it stay there, he said, for tonight. No one laughed. By the end of the evening, the portico was full of voices. People spoke of Serapion as if he had only just entered their home. But he could no longer hear them. That was the hardest truth. We were late with our gratitude. When everyone had gone, I remained alone before Nerida's portrait. The girl held the bird gently in both hands, as if afraid to damage its wings. I thought of Serapion. He had lost his wife and daughter in a foreign city. He had come to Ostia, to a noisy house by the harbour, settled under the stairs, and for 21 years did what he knew how to do. He watched carefully. He saw who was crying, who was afraid, who was cold, who pretended to be coping. He did not force himself into other people's lives. He did not demand love. He did not call us family aloud. He simply remembered, by name. After the exhibition, Publius did not put grain crates in his room. "Let it be storage for the building," he said. "But we will leave the portraits in the portico. Not all of them, the best ones." "Not the best," Fulvia corrected. "Ours." And that is what we did. The casket with the remaining boards was given to the library at the temple. The notebook was placed under glass. A small tablet beside it read, "Gaius Julius Serapion, gatekeeper of the house by the harbour gate." He remembered, those others failed to notice. I wanted to add, "Forgive us," but words like that are not written on bronze. They are written inside oneself. A month later, a new watchman came to the building, young, broad-shouldered, with freckles and wary eyes. In the morning, I went down to the courtyard. He was oiling the hinges of the gate. Once, I would have nodded and walked past. I almost did. Then I stopped. "What is your name?" He looked surprised. "Felix, mistress." "And your father's name?" He smiled uncertainly. "Felix, son of Marcus." "Good morning, Felix, son of Marcus." He straightened. "Good morning, mistress." I went back upstairs slowly. On the 3rd floor, I stopped by the window. In the courtyard below, the new watchman swept the stones. His movements were still awkward. He did not yet know where the dust gathered, where water stood after rain, which door creaked louder than the others. He would learn. The important thing was that we learn too. Not to pass by a person for 21 years thinking we will ask his name tomorrow, because tomorrow does not always come. Sometimes all that remains is a small room under the stairs, the scent of wax, hundreds of faces on the walls, and the cold understanding that he saw all of us, and we only now saw him.